August 7, 1942, Guadalcanal, Solomon Islands. The war in the Pacific reached a phase that could change everything. American Marines landed in the area at dawn. Radio operators were prepared to send urgent messages as the battle began. From the other side, Japanese listening posts recorded every signal. Their code breakers waited with confidence. It was an easy task for them because they had broken many American codes before. They expected to break this one as well. But this time, the message they heard sounded different and new. It was not something the Japanese code breakers expected to hear. It was fast, but clear. It had patterns, but it did not match any languages they ever knew. Not English, not Spanish, not German, or any languages that their scholars had studied before the war. They were confused, panicked. Because they didn't know that the American army was using a Native American language that they once tried to erase. Before the war, Navajo children were punished for speaking their own language. In school, teachers would force the students to stand for hours if they used and spoke Navajo. It was because the government wanted all Americans to speak only English. For years, it was hidden and kept in the dark. But still, the Navajo language survived. It was passed quietly from parents to their children and used inside their homes in secret. Several written documents existed at that time that were kept hidden. That was why it became the perfect code. June 1942. Navajo Marines brought radios into the battlefield for the first time. They sent their coded messages in seconds, faster than any machine. They made no mistakes. The trained Japanese and German codebreakers understood nothing. The Navajo code stayed unbroken for the rest of the war. The language that America once tried to erase became the code that helped them save nations. This is the untold story of the Navajo Code. February 1942. The United States faced a serious problem in the Pacific War. Japan had some of the best codebreakers in the world. Japanese intelligence listened to every American message sent. For months, they broke the Army and Navy codes with confidence. Using those codes, they launched counterattacks. The Americans lost because Japan already knew their plans and what was coming. Germany also had strong cryptography machines. Their Enigma machine confused the Allies for years. And the Germans believed that American codes could be broken using their equipment and machines. The United States felt hopeless. They needed codes that Japan and Germany had never studied or heard about. Something that had no books, no guides, no recordings, no alphabet that the enemy could study. Some hidden language that only a few people could understand. That was when the Navajo language appeared, a forgotten language. In the 1920s and 1930s, the U.S. had boarding schools to erase the language. Navajo children were punished for speaking it. Because of this, the language never became written or recorded. The lack of written materials later made the language perfect for wartime communication. Japan and Germany could not study something that almost did not exist in documents. American officers understood they could no longer depend on standard military codes. Every new code they created lasted only for weeks. Japan broke it. Germany broke it. They were always using codes that were only useful for weeks, and the Allies would lose if this continued. That was when Philip Johnston came up with an idea that Marines had never heard before. Philip Johnston was a World War I Army veteran and a civil engineer who grew up on the Navajo lands because his parents were missionaries there. He was one of the very few non-Navajos who could speak the Navajo language fluently. The Marines agreed to test it. On February 28, 1942, 4 Navajo speakers demonstrated how fast they could send and receive messages. The officers were shocked because this language moved faster than any machine. They used machines to encrypt and decrypt messages, and the process was slow. To send a coded message using a machine, the operator had to type the message into the cipher machine, generate the coded output, and send it over the radio. On the other side, the operator had to set up the same machine and decode the message manually. The average time for each message was about 30 minutes or more. The average time using Navajo codes was much faster. Navajo speakers didn't need to use machines except for a radio. They could send and receive messages in real time. The average time was only 20 seconds per message. Because of this discovery, the Marines recruited the first 29 Navajo men. They trained at Camp Pendleton, and they built a complete code system. Soon, they created more than 200 special military terms, all spoken in Navajo. They also created an alphabet code so they could spell any English words when needed. Everything was memorized. Nothing was written. That made it impossible to steal. Everything was inside their heads. August 7th, 1942. The code was ready for war. Navajo code users landed with the Marines at Guadalcanal, Solomon Islands. This was the first time the code was used in a real battle. The Japanese radio operators listened to the messages. They expected another victory, but what they heard did not match any known human language. It had tones and strange sounds. It was spoken too fast for their equipment to process it. They panicked and tried to find help from Germany, but the Germans also knew nothing about the new code used by the Americans. The Navajo code couldn't be broken by them. The success at Guadalcanal proved that the Navajo code was not just useful, it was an important tool to defeat the enemy. From that moment, commanders requested Navajo code operators for every major mission in the Pacific. The Marines trusted them. The system worked in every battle. The enemy never broke a single code. As the war continued, more Navajo men joined the battle. By 1943, the Marines had more than 300 code talkers trained and ready. They memorized hundreds of new terms. When new weapons appeared, they created new words. If there were new targets, they formed new codes. Everything was in their memory. Nothing was written on paper. The Japanese became desperate. They studied the Navajo code and compared the sounds to different languages. They couldn't find where the language came from. For 2 days straight, 6 code talkers sent over 800 messages without a single mistake. These messages helped direct troop movements, artillery fire, and supply routes. Yet the enemy remained completely in the dark. February 1945. The Navajo code had already proven itself in many battles. Japan failed to break it at Guadalcanal, Bougainville, Guam, Saipan, and Peleliu. Every time the enemy tried to listen, they became more confused. But the strongest test of the Navajo code was still ahead. It happened in one of the hardest and bloodiest battles of the Pacific War. Iwo Jima. Iwo Jima was a volcanic island. It was small, but it was Japan's strongest defensive position. The Japanese built miles of tunnels, bunkers, and hidden firing points. So the Marines needed perfect communication to survive. As soon as American troops landed, the Japanese immediately opened fire from their hidden tunnels. Wounded soldiers were lying everywhere, and smoke covered the island. Desperate radio messages went out, asking for support and backup. In the middle of this scene, 6 Navajo code talkers worked non-stop. Their job was to send and receive messages faster than any enemy could react. For 2 days, they barely slept. They sent more than 800 messages. No mistakes, no delays. Major Howard Connor, the Marine signal officer at that time, said that without the Navajo, the Marines would never have taken Iwo Jima. The Navajo code talkers worked hard during the entire battle. When soldiers needed coordinates, the Navajo sent them. When Marines were trapped and needed help, they called for support. Their speed saved thousands of lives. On the other side, the Japanese still attempted to break the Navajo code. They replayed and slowed down the recordings many times. They compared them to other native languages they had studied before the war. But nothing worked. They couldn't identify the tones and sounds of the language. So they turned to their strongest ally, the Nazi Germans. Germany was confident in their Enigma machine. They had broken many codes. They believed they were the smartest codebreakers in the world. Germany requested recordings. They analyzed them. But soon, something unexpected happened. The proud German intelligence realized they couldn't break it either. They tried looking for books, alphabets, and written records. Nothing. And for the first time, Germans feared the Americans' Navajo Code. The Nazis' confidence began to break. None of their tools and knowledge worked. Germany and Japan both realized a hard truth. They were not simply fighting the American soldiers. They were fighting against a code that shattered their confidence, a code that could not be broken. But the danger did not end at Iwo Jima. Every new island became harder. Japan increased its defenses. It became a deadly battle. One mistake could cost hundreds of lives. This was why the Marines depended more on the Navajo Code. As the war continued, the enemy focused on breaking the Navajo Code. But every time they tried, they failed. American soldiers were aware of the enemy's confusion. This gave the Marines more confidence in the Navajo Code and its system. Soon, the Marines weren't the only ones requesting the help of the Navajo men. They were assigned to airfields, artillery units, infantry regiments, and tank battalions. Every time communication was needed, the Navajo were placed beside the radio. March 1945. The Pacific War was entering its final and most dangerous phase. Japan refused to surrender. Every island became a battlefield. Americans depended on fast and secure messages more than ever before. As the Marines prepared for the landing on Okinawa, one of the largest operations in the Pacific, they also expected stronger defenses from the Japanese. For this mission, more Navajo Code Talkers were placed across different units. When the battle started, smoke filled the area. Artillery guns were fired non-stop. The Marines trusted the Navajo completely. While the battle between the Japanese and Americans continued, Japan made one final attempt to break the code. They did their best to understand the patterns, tried to find a clue, and analyzed the recordings. But the Navajo language remained impossible to understand. Japan realized that it was not just a code, it was a system that changed constantly. April 1945. The German cryptographic division placed the recordings inside a secure analysis room in Berlin. They turned on the recordings, listened carefully, and wrote down every sound they heard. At first, they thought the messages came from several languages mixed together. But after hours of listening, they could not identify a single word. This confused them. German codebreakers had cracked many Allied codes. They had studied multiple languages, but this code did not match any pattern they understood. No matter how long they studied the recordings, they couldn't understand them. In the Pacific, the Americans realized that the faster the Navajo sent messages, the faster the operations became. There were no delays, no misunderstandings, no confusion. The code was no longer just a tool. It became their key to win against the enemy. Japan and Germany had been defeated not by bombs, not by machines, not by tanks, guns, or aircraft, but by the voices and hard work of the Navajo men and their language, which the world once tried to erase. August 1945. The war finally ended. The Navajo Code Talkers returned to a country that still had no idea what they had done for the war. Their mission remained secret and hidden from the public. The military didn't allow them to speak about it. Their families only knew they served as Marines, but they didn't know the truth. The men saved thousands of lives using their Navajo language and their minds. They expected recognition. They expected the American officers to tell the country how their language helped them during the war. But it didn't happen. The information about the Navajo Code was kept a secret. Their life after the war was not easy. Many of the Navajo Code Talkers returned to lands that still lacked resources and support. No water, no electricity. The Americans still forced Native American children to speak English only. They were supposed to come home as heroes, but they were treated as outsiders in their own land. For the United States, the success of the Navajo Code created stronger military communication. They learned that not all powerful tools came from machines. Sometimes they came from knowledge ignored by generations. Still, it remained hidden from the public. The military wanted to keep using the Navajo Code for secure communications during the Cold War. The Code Talkers continued living in silence. They were not allowed to share what happened in the Pacific War. Not until 1968. 23 years after World War II ended. The U.S. military declassified the Navajo Code. The government no longer considered it a secret. This was the moment the public learned what the Navajo had done during the war. Many Americans were shocked. They had never heard that a Native American language was used as a weapon. They never heard that America won many difficult battles in the Pacific because of them. The people had treated them as outsiders. In 1969, at a reunion of the 4th Marine Division, the surviving Code Talkers were invited to attend. For the first time, other Marines publicly honored their contribution. Veterans told their stories about how the Navajo Code saved thousands of lives. Photographs were released. A story hidden for decades was now recognized by the public. In the 1980s, historians conducted deeper research about the Navajo Code. They revealed that Japan had spent years trying to break the code. In the 1990s, the story continued to be recognized. A Japanese photographer, Kinji Kawano, traveled across the Navajo lands. He captured photos of the surviving Code Talkers and listened to their stories. His images were displayed in museums in Japan and the United States. By the late 1990s, schools, documentaries, and books began teaching the Navajo Code stories. Children learned about the Navajo language. Surviving veterans were interviewed. The United States corrected its mistakes for keeping the Navajo and their language hidden for decades. July 26, 2001. President George W. Bush invited the surviving Navajo Code Talkers and presented them with the Congressional Gold Medal, the highest civilian honor in the country. The Navajo were honored at last, though many had not lived to see this moment. The Navajo, who were once punished for speaking their language, later used that same language to save American soldiers. The U.S. government tried to remove the Native Americans' identity, but they became the key to surviving World War II. Japan and Germany believed that they could dominate through advanced technologies and violence. But when the Navajo Code was introduced, neither country could break it. Not their Enigma machines, nor scholars, because it came from people who valued their culture and served with their hearts. The Navajo Code Talkers didn't join the war for praise. They joined to protect their country and their people. They proved that war was not always about using force and violence. Sometimes it requires identity, culture, and love to serve your nation.